Good morning, everybody. Good to have you here. I'm glad to see everybody found the breakfast bar, and thanks for fighting through the elements today. It wasn't easy. I mean, it was. This was the day that your sandals stick on the way to the hot tub, right? It's that cold. So thank you all for being here today, and thanks to all of our experts as well. As you know, this series has been going on for a number of years now, and I'll explain a little bit about it just before Al Gileczek gets up here and presents the Michigan Future Business Index. But what we found at the Michigan Business Network was that it was really important for people to have a good picture, a good economic picture of not only where they are, but where business feels they're going to be in the next 6 months. And so that's what brought this thing to begin. And it's been around for 17 years in one form or another, and took on a really different ilk, a more professional ilk, and became a bigger study statewide when the accident fund jumped in and we're deep in their debt. I also usually will do a community roundtable here today, but we're going to dispense of that because those are usually used for kind of economic pictures locally, and the day is going to be full of economic pictures, both local and statewide. So we'll dispense with that. The other thing we do is, and you can find this on the MichiganBusinessNetwork.com website, or the free app you can get at the App Store, you can call up this type of a circumstance, this type of a gathering in 6 different markets around the state of Michigan, and they are in chronological order. Traverse City, where we've already been, Marquette, where we were last week. Should we talk about weather? Yeah. Today is Lansing. After this will be Grand Rapids. Bob, Grand Rapids is coming right up, isn't it? This week, yeah. And then after that, Detroit and of course the Bay region over at Saginaw Bay City area. That gives you a pretty good smattering of economic conditions in the 4 major areas around the state. So the Michigan Future Business Index, which is going to be the first presentation today, will be delivered by Al Gileczek. We want to thank them again for underwriting this. It allowed us to step up to make it a much bigger study. That happened a few years ago. And I also, Paul King, did you get here yet? I know you came in last night. Hey, Paul, everybody take a look at Paul King. Paul is the guy at Inside ROI who actually conducts this very thorough survey. He's the 3rd company to do it, and the reason he's the 3rd company is that we followed him to each employer. And the fact is, ROI Insight, we finally talked him into going on his own. Now we're worried he's going to do too well and forget who we are. But thank you, Paul, for the great job you do. So, without further ado, let me bring up Al Gileczek to present the Michigan Future Business Index.
Thank you. Let me start off, but my leadership team is sitting at a table, and I couldn't help but chuckle. I know they were when you said that Accident Fund has made this a bigger ilk and more professional, 2 things I've never, ever been accused of. So thanks, everybody, for coming. Paul, I want to thank you for sending me the presentation at 2 in the morning last night so I could be adequately prepared. This survey is done every year, and most of you probably attended this before. It's in this past year we had over 400 small and medium-sized businesses that were surveyed, and it is commissioned by the Accident Fund and the Michigan Business Network in concert with ROI, and then you've got the whole margin and error, disclaimer stuff. While growth and optimism show signs of slight slowdown, many small and medium businesses are enjoying continued strength in sales and profits. Clearly, I think driven by some of the national narrative, there are growing concerns with taxes. I think we are all probably in that camp. Finding qualified workers remains the #1 challenge. That's not a change. That's the same thing we feel at our business as well, and it's the same thing we hear our field people, and they're out with our customers out in the state. Despite that, there's quite a bit of optimism, and we also hear that when we're out with our customers. If we look just over the past 6 months, The indicators, all growth indicators have slowed. So on one hand, optimism is good, and you'll see that thread throughout the study. On the other hand, if you look at the actual facts, the actual data on the indicators, there is a downward trend. Wages, hiring, sales, profit, and investments are all down. And yet I think people are reflecting on the fact, I know we have in our business as well, saying it's still a good year. I think still things seem to be pretty good. Satisfaction with the economy, again, despite the fact you see a number of statistics indicating downward trends, there's very, very strong satisfaction with the economy. In fact, in near record positive territory. Over 3/4, 76% are satisfied, 55% somewhat satisfied, 21% very satisfied. So again, I think if you hearken back to less than 10 years ago, probably 8, 9 years ago, obviously a very different tone in the state. And very few were dissatisfied. That would be one member of my leadership team would be in that category. There was what I found interesting was the last bullet point, and satisfaction remains the strongest in the Bay City, Saginaw, Flint, and Upper Peninsula. Now, if you think about that, anybody, we do business we're in 21 states. We're licensed in all 50 states, but we actually actively do business in 21 plus California. And if you talk to people that do business across states, and if you talk to people even around the state, you typically hear Ann Arbor, some of the growth in Southeast Michigan and Grand Rapids. And I think this is partly a reflection of the attitude of these people. Next year, 2018, will mark the 20th year that I've been an executive between two significant regional insurance carriers, First Citizens in the last 10 plus years at Accident Fund. And over those 20 years, we do annual agent meetings around the state. So we go to all of those places that you've talked about. And the fact of the matter is we always liked going to Flint and Saginaw and the UP. They will go through a snowstorm, 2 time zones. One year in Southeast Michigan, we moved the meeting from Dearborn to Plymouth, and they wouldn't drive the extra 20 minutes. You know, they didn't want to come to the meeting. They're just bigger whiners, frankly. And so, I mean, 20 years, it's a fact. So the reality is, God bless our folks in the Bay City, Saginaw, Flint, and Upper Peninsula. Those are areas that have been through much tougher times than any part in the state you think about. And the Upers are just awesome. They'll come to anything if you throw alcohol in the meeting, which we do. Greatest challenges to the business, keeping and attracting good employees. We hear that everywhere. We hear it within our company, and we hear it, like I said, with our customers. And the study confirm that as well. Finding new customers, I don't think this is a significant change. Managing growth up a bit. Taxes, obviously, again, the national narrative, I think, is helping with that. And economy holds steady at 6%. Noticeably down from a few years ago when there's a lot of concern about ACA and the health care and the Obamacare, even though we really don't know what the future holds. We're owned by Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they're constantly having to reassess what their strategy is going to be given what the national trend is. But right now it has calmed down a little bit. Reasons for optimism: business growth. That's up a couple points. Economy's improving, which is interesting given if you look at the stats, it's technically not improving. But again, things are good. Sales are up, great staff. Wish I could say the same. My customers is down a little bit. And the demand for products and services, no change. No significant statistics, I think, that jump out dominant-wise. Again, but it's just a general theme of optimism. Projected sales and profits. While growth was expected, sales and profit projections remain positive, or expected to slow. Things are generally good. I think positive trends are still strong. Sales projections down a little bit. Profits, again, down a little bit, but it's still, the common thread is optimism. Once again, our friends from Bay City, Saginaw, Flint, and the UP, heavily intoxicated, feel very, very positive about the expectations for increased sales. And it is interesting because we do track a lot of payroll statistics. All of our our policies are based on payroll. So we do track by regions, and this doesn't necessarily jive with what's actually happening. I think we would say that one of my actuaries in the room, I think probably Southwest Michigan is probably, no surprise, actually a stronger region if you actually look at where payroll is growing. But these folks, I think, are just a little more optimistic. And again, it is clearly much better than it was a few years ago. We actually also see, I think, some improvement in the Lansing area, which is good for all of us. Expectations for increased profits, once again, Bay City, Saginaw, Flint, and Lansing markets, which again I think is just reflective of the folks there and the optimism as to how things were so bad several years ago. Hiring projections are highest in Lansing, and that's not just driven by the government. As we track, we're actually seeing some noticeable growth in the high-tech technology fields, which I think is something that's more recent within the last 5 years. And a majority of the businesses, again, indicate difficulty with filling openings, as have we. We've had some jobs that we consider fairly entry-level jobs. We think we have a very good benefit package. We think we're one of the better employers in Lansing, and it's amazing how difficult sometimes it is to find the right people. So that is still a challenge for, I don't think that's unique to Michigan. It's not unique to any one segment of the industries. I think it is just a common thread for where we're at. As far as projected wage increases, wage growth is slowing, with only 35% saying they plan to raise wages in the next 6 months, and that's down 5% from June. Most, they're at 53%, they would keep wages unchanged, and the decreases drops to 0% for the first time. So that I guess is a positive thing. Again, projections for wage increases are strongest in those same areas, with West Michigan being added as well. And our whiners from Southeast Michigan are once again absent from the study. Conclusions. Things to watch: future investments in hiring and wages to attract qualified employees. Slight increase in concern over taxes. I think that may only grow over the course of the next few months. And then obviously Washington, D.C. decisions. Other conclusions: small businesses continue to find success in Michigan. I think that we hear that. Growth slows, but optimism is very strong. And more than 3/4 believe Michigan is a pretty good or excellent market for their business. And most believe state taxes are mostly very fair. That's somewhat surprising. I don't know if that's a change dramatically. If you don't mind, I'd like to add a few anecdotes from what we see. As I indicated, all of our policies are based on payroll, so we study a lot of the payroll statistics. And accident fund writes just under 20% of the market. So as the market leader in Michigan for workers' comp, we do see some unique industries that are a little bit different than these trends. We see it in, for instance, home health care, no surprise, is a burgeoning business. We write a lot of home health care, everything from very small accounts, with literally the kind of people that come in and sit with an elderly person, all the way to senior care facilities. That is a fast-growing business. Retail is actually showing some growth in this past year, and this is year over year. And one industry that was showed the biggest lag when things were bad and then started to recover: construction. We still see our payrolls for all of our contractors, and predominantly the smaller artisan contractors, continue to grow over last year and over the year before. So even though we track audits, our premium audits and our endorsements very closely, our audits and endorsements will be down this year over last year. The year before was a record year. The last 3 years have been very strong. This year will be very strong. Again, just like this, it's just down some, but there are industries that do show very positive signs. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. I appreciate it. It's interesting that you mentioned the UP in particular. Actually presented the Michigan Future Business Index in Marquette just last week. And when you speak up north in the UP, if you're in Marquette, somebody is there from the Sioux and somebody is there from Ironwood. It's amazing how they all get together and they all travel, and 4.5 hours drive isn't a big deal to anybody up there. So it's a great group. I might add, too, sometimes this index makes a lot more sense with alcohol. All right? All right. Next up, one of the great indicators of how we're doing, especially locally here, economically, is how the Convention and Visitors Bureau is looking at the next year. So what kinds of things have been booked? And that's a pretty solid indicator. And also what has been done in the past year. So with that, the head of the Convention and Visitors Bureau of Greater Lansing, Jack Schripsema.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm appreciative that you put me up front this time. I'm going to follow the singing economist, or Bob Trezise and Tim Daman, so thank you very much for that. And I might mention, too, Chris has done an awesome job as the chairman of our Hug a Tourist campaign throughout the year, so we appreciate that. On the screen, I've got a slide that shows the impact of tourism for our region, because it is a pretty healthy contributor to our economy. We welcome over 4.8 million visitors a year to the region, and this is up substantially in the last 5 years, who spend over $600 million directly at local businesses and support over 11,000 jobs. Now, I've been told that the clicker is missing, so I'm going to have to ask the back if you'd change to the next slide. If anybody finds the clicker, please let Chris know. The next slide describes what the mission of the Convention and Visitors Bureau is. Primarily, our mission is to create positive economic impact through the promotion of tourism to the region. And we focus on three major markets: group and convention, the sports. We are a huge sector for us is the youth amateur sports market. We did, I think, well over 100 sporting events, from soccer, lacrosse, hockey, figure skating, wrestling, tennis, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on and on. We are truly a great sports town. We also focus on leisure. These are folks that come, families, couples, et cetera, to enjoy the weekend, enjoy some of the amenities that we have in the greater Lansing region. And because the sports market has grown and the group and tourism or group and convention market has grown in the last several years, we're exposing more and more potential visitors to the greater Lansing region and all the great things that are going on here, and that's stimulating more and more leisure visits. Well, let's go to the next slide. We're going to look at the tourism stats for the U.S. economy. Tourism is the seventh largest industry in the country. That they spend about $990 billion directly at businesses throughout the United States. They support over 15 million travel-related jobs, and that's up 2.5% in 2016 from 2015. We hosted 75.5 million international visitors, which actually was down in 2016, just under 3%, and it's trending down about 4% this year, and that's kind of known as the Trump effect because of some of our immigration and our visa issues or rules and regulations. That is down. Now, the good news is our domestic travel is up significantly, due in part to the healthy U.S. economy, so that's more than offset the decline from international visitors. Domestic travel, we had over 2 billion trips in 2016, which was up just over 1%. Let's go to the next slide. Take a look at the Michigan tourism and the impact for our state. Since the end of the Great Recession, we've seen a tremendous growth in visitors to the state of Michigan. Last year, we had 119 million visitors, which was up about 6 million from the 2015. They spent about $23.7 billion, which was up about $2 billion from 2015. Overnight visitors, I should say, are a little higher value visitors for us because they tend to spend about 3 times as much as day trippers. Day trippers come for a day and visit the community and enjoy the assets, but overnight visitors, of course, you've got hotels and restaurants and shops and attractions and so on. So let's take a look at the next slide and see how Lansing is doing compared to the rest of the state for year to date. Our occupancy is up this year. This is the 6th year of record growth for the region. We're at 67.3 year to date. Now, this is through October. We don't have the November and December numbers yet, but we're expecting that we will finish the year about a point to a point and a half up from 2016. And I showed on the slide the Michigan average is 63.7% occupancy, so we're almost 3.5 points above that. It wasn't that many years ago that we lagged the Michigan average quite significantly, and now we are one of the leaders in the state. So I think that's a good sign for our region. Nationally, the average occupancy is 67.6, so we're right about where the national average is. And a few years ago, we lagged that significantly. It was about 6 years ago, we were in the 50s. And we were probably had one of the worst occupancies in the state, and now we have one of the highest in the state. Let's take a look at the occupancy. Go to the next slide. This gives you the trend for the last 6 years. Again, you see that we're up about 3 points to last year. Again, I expect that we'll finish the year, November, December being a little slower. Typically in the region, we'll probably end up in the 65 to 65.5%, which will be up 1.5 points from 2015. Let's go to the next slide. Most importantly, what is the room demand? These are the number of room nights that are actually consumed in the region. And you can see last year in 2016, we exceeded for the first time ever 1 million room nights consumed and ended up at 1,030,000. And this year, we are expecting that we'll end up around 1,040,000, give or take a couple thousand, because again, we don't have the November numbers in. So you can, if you look at the graph, you'll see that the growth is starting to slow a little bit. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Our occupancy here in the greater Lansing region is now one of the leading occupancies in the state. We're ahead of Grand Rapids. We're nipping at the heels of Ann Arbor. And we're ahead of most of the areas in Detroit. I think there's a couple pockets that are ahead of us. So the capital city is doing very well in the tourism, and I think that will remain strong in the years to come. If we go to the next slide, we'll look at the average daily rate. And this is important because this is an indicator of the profitability of our hotels and their ability to reinvest in their properties, keep their facilities fresh, employ staff, hire employees. And you can see that last year was the first year this region exceeded the $100 average rate, and we're ahead of that by over $5, so we expect to finish up again in 2017. If we look at the next slide, these are the three of the national forecasters, some of their projections for the tourism sector for 2018. I think if you look at all of them, they're all basically telling us that they expect occupancy next year to be flat. I think there's a couple that indicate that it's going to be down by 0.2% and one that's going to be up by 0.1%. So they're projecting pretty much a flat occupancy. And ADR is expected, the average daily rate is expected to go up about 2 to 3%. And I think that's probably what we're going to see here locally as well. And that's not a bad thing, because what you've seen in the last number of years is a proliferation of developments, new properties throughout the country. So the inventory has increased significantly, and so I think the consumption is up, but the occupancy, just because of the number of rooms in inventory, will be somewhat flat. Next slide, please. So looking forward, we have the demand that we've seen is really creating a lot of development interest in the region. I suspect you've read it in the paper, you've seen it on the news. Let's look at the next slide. I wanted to show you some of the projects that are on the board or underway, being developed right now, that will increase the inventory, bring some new products to the greater Lansing region. In 2018, if the 4 properties you see listed on the slide open as expected and announced, we'll add over 400 rooms to our inventory. And based on when they're going to open, I think the first one is scheduled to open January 5th. The Homewood Suites in Eastwood, I believe, is in March sometime. Spring Hill is in the fall. And the Hilton Garden Inn is at the end of the 2018, although I suspect, and looking at the project, that it might go into 2019. But if all these properties were to open in the coming year, they'll bring a 90,000 room night inventory to Lansing. If you remember the slide on growth, we're going to be up about 10,000 room nights this year. So that's going to be impossible for this region to absorb that many room nights and maintain the occupancy that we've seen. We'll still have a good occupancy. I suspect we're going to continue to be in the 60s, which 5-6 years plus ago, we were always in the low 50s. So I think we are going to sustain at a good high level in the 60s, but our occupancy likely will come down next year unless we see some properties that perhaps at the end of their life cycle that end up closing and reduce the inventory. But I'm not aware of any of those. So right now we're expecting that the inventory will grow by about 90,000 room nights. And in 2019, we have a couple more that we are expecting. If they're on time, you can see we'll add another 260 rooms per night to the inventory in Lansing. And then there's a list of about 6 projects that have been discussed, announced, different stages, and whether they'll happen, when they'll happen is anybody's guess at this point, but I suspect we're going to see more. And the reason for that is, of course, the high demand in Lansing is attracting attention from the developers, and this is a good market to develop a new property. So given all that information, I think tourism is going to remain strong in the Lansing region. We still are one of the go-to places in the state for group and convention business. We, being the center of the state, being the capital city, all those things, the MSU contribute to our success there, and I don't see that changing. Our sports, being a great sports town, the facilities we have at MSU and throughout the region are second to none, and we'll continue to see an explosion in that youth amateur sports market, which I think this year through the end of October, brought in over 70,000 future Hall of Fame athletes. And about 270 spectators. Often when they come, mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, and siblings come with them. So we like that. They get out in the community and enjoy our amenities and spend money. So we're expecting about a 2% growth next year. Occupancy probably will be down, but consumption will be up slightly. And average daily rate, I also expect, will continue to rise. I thank you for your attention, and we'll turn it back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Jack. Good job, Jack. We appreciate that. It does a great job, along with his staff, too. Where are CVB? Okay. So you can see they only got 2 here because the rest of them are working like crazy to get more people in. Anyway, the next guy up can probably, just by anecdotally talking to his membership, give us a pretty good indication economically of how we're doing here. And that would be the director of the Lansing Regional Chamber of Commerce and good friend, Tim Daman.
Thanks, Chris. I'm not going to call you a hugger, though. You're not doing any hugging around the chamber at all these days. But
lot closer.
Closer, yeah, that's right. So we'll keep our distance here. But thank you to Chris and his team here. This is probably the 4th or 5th year I think that we've done this, and it gives my fellow panel members and myself kind of an opportunity to play economist, Charlie, for at least a half an hour or so up here in the morning, and kind of share what we kind of think is happening in this region. And certainly we believe that there's a great deal of optimism, there's a great deal of growth, and you're going to hear that from the couple of us as we get through the remainder of the morning here. But first of all, I want to start off by just recognizing my team, and I believe that we have Michelle Ross, Steve Japping, and Kristen Belzer here from the chamber this morning. And it's been a couple really, really good years for our organization, and we're continuing to grow. And earlier this year, I was very proud that our team was recognized by the Michigan Association of Chamber Professionals. We were a Chamber of the Year finalist, really recognized and highlighted through the U.S. Chamber and kind of that selection process. So a group of our peers nationally recognized us with that finalist, and very, very proud of our organization as we continue to grow. Membership and retention, we're bucking the national trends, and that is a big thank you to all of you sitting in this room here today as you continue to support our organization. But our membership retention levels are topping out well above 90%, putting us in the top 10% of our peers nationally. And again, when you look at membership and associations across the country, you're seeing more of a trend of decline in membership, and we're continuing to see strength in numbers and continuing to get tremendous support. So a big thank you to all of you. This year alone, we've had over 50 ribbon cuttings where we've celebrated groundbreakings, new investments, new businesses coming in, milestone celebrations, anniversaries, and that investment totaling close to $95 million from those 50-plus ribbon cuttings, and about close to probably between 450 to 500 new jobs. And I will tell you that is a lot coming from small businesses. And so when we talk about the importance and critical aspect of small businesses, not only across the country but here in our region, it's very significant. This afternoon today, we'll have our last economic club luncheon. And with that, we'll finish somewhere between 63 to 64 events and programs that we've hosted this year, connecting with probably more than 8,000 of our members. And so, thank you all for, continuing to attend what we believe are some of the best networking and business professional development opportunities in the region. Those events range from everything from Economic Club to our annual dinner to some of the elected official roundtables that we do throughout the course of the year as well. We can go to the next slide. So when we start thinking about business growth, I want to share what we heard from the business survey, and that is that optimism. And I think we continue to see that through our membership, although we have begun to see it slip a little bit, but we've talked a little bit. I've said this is kind of the uncertainty, the optimistic uncertainty, I think, with 2017. And one of the things I think that we all know in the business community is uncertainty is not good. But the optimism still for our membership are probably at levels that they haven't been at since 2008. I think some of the top issues we hear, without question, talent. We hear a lot about the regulatory climate, roads fixed, controlling healthcare costs, improving education are some of those top priorities that we continue to hear from our members. We're a couple weeks removed from Small Business Saturday, and our membership team did a great job in connecting with about 20 of our members and helping them promote the Small Business Saturday aspect. And while we don't have the data from the most recent one, I think nationally when you looked in 2016, it was more than $15 billion that was spent with small businesses on that Small Business Saturday. And I think it's no different than here in our region. I know I spent part of that day over in Old Town and the streets were packed, and I know a number of the retailers had a very, very good day that day. When we look at the economic impact of our membership, I like to start kind of with our leadership circle members, and that's 10 of the probably larger employers here in this region. And when we asked them a couple years ago about the economic spin that they have in the region here, working with other businesses and providers from IT to legal, financial, to a morning like today, snow removal, they're spending over $600 million in our region. That's significant. And that's not economic, that's not payroll or any of the other types of opportunities. That's strictly business-to-business economic impact of keeping dollars kind of flowing through our region. So you can see the importance of that. So I would challenge and urge all of you sitting here today, as you're looking at that and looking for IT providers, you're looking for financial, legal services and whatnot, think here in our region first. And then when you kind of start thinking about the whole keeping it local aspect of things as well, when we look at that shift of spending, and a 10% shift in spending could contribute upwards of $200 million to a local and regional economy. And so again, the importance of that small business and kind of thinking that first here with what and how we're spending our dollars. And so my challenge, I guess, for you this morning is we're 2 weeks from the holidays, is over the next couple of weeks, identify a couple, 2 or 3 of your favorite local businesses and go spend $50 with them leading up to the holidays. We'll go to the next slide. Looks like you're already there. You're way ahead of me, so thank you. Public policy. Well, a year ago, we talked about the optimistic viewpoint of fixing a regulatory climate federally that the businesses had with the new President-elect Trump at that time. And going into this year, I think the disappointment that we weren't able to get anything moved on health care and any of the reforms that we need there. And I know that we continue to hear from our members that they're seeing anywhere from low double digits to high double digit increases in health care premiums. I know we've seen the same thing at the chamber, and so clearly we need to continue to push for reforms there. Tax policy, we're in the midst of some tax policy right now. Both the House and Senate have passed their versions. It's in conference committee now, and expectations and anticipations would be by the end of this year we will have tax policy signed, and it'll probably be the first tax policy reform in over 30 years. And I'll leave the specifics of that to the real economists here later in the program. But we have a great partnership with the U.S. Chamber, and you can see the graphic that's up here. It's a tax pro-growth tax policy tracker, and it's kind of tracked that aspect from going back into probably early to mid-October. And I was one that said, on the heels of seeing nothing happening with health care, I was one that said this will never happen by the end of the year. But yet here we are a couple weeks away, and all anticipation expectations are that will happen. We start looking here locally more at the state level. Early this year, we saw a couple economic development incentive bills that passed, and that's significant from the standpoint that under the Schneider administration, this would be the first 2 economic development incentive packages that we've seen pass. And so to give our good friends at LEAP and other economic developers around the state some of those tools that have been taken away from them over the last 8 to 12 years. So that was very significant. That was the My Thrive and the Good Jobs for Michigan packages. We're tracking right now a series of bills regarding career technical education. So really trying to change up some of the curriculum aspect and really exposing students to a little bit more of career exploration as we continue to look at those the career technical aspects aspect in the skilled trades to kind of keep our economy moving forward. Just last week, or actually last year, I talked about, and probably all 4 years we've been part of this program, we've talked about the legacy costs and just the critical nature and importance of where our local municipalities are, to the tune of $18 billion statewide in unfunded liabilities and legacy costs. So nothing happened last year in lame duck. They weren't able to move anything along, but last week they passed some OPEB legislation that's going to require a more transparent reporting process from our local municipalities. And again, this issue is not going away. So there was I think the teeth in that piece of legislation last week was the emergency manager component that was removed from what was passed, but that's still a real possibility, and the emergency manager is still out there. It's just what the communities and municipalities are doing and getting through certain phases. And so, again, the issue is not going away. I think when we look at the city of Lansing here, for each resident in the city of Lansing, they're responsible for about $3,300 of these unfunded liabilities. So it's a significant issue that we are. And then here locally, kind of pushing for some Coleman Road. So just in a stone's throw from where we sat this morning, the Coleman Road expansion and connecting underneath 127, very important economic development piece and economic growth prospect or opportunity for this northern tier of East Lansing and the city to continue some of the economic growth here. And it's been a great partnership, and it's been very unique to see the three counties come together in this. So you have Clinton County, Ingham County, and Eaton County, and someone might ask, well, why Ingham and Eaton? And they're not, it doesn't touch them, but that will tell you that the collaborative effort of what we've been able to pull together with the three counties here to get them to support this project that sits in the city of East Lansing and in Clinton County. We have great support from the city of East Lansing as well as a number of businesses up here, and we're certainly anticipating that we're going to get this through, if not by the end of the year, shortly into the first part of next year. And we certainly don't downplay the significance of $7.5 million, but it's $7.5 million in a $50 billion state budget. And so we certainly think that there's opportunities to get some investment for the Coleman Road expansion. We look ahead to 2018 as well. Look and expect a number of statewide ballot initiatives that you're going to be asked to vote on as well. We'll elect a new governor, and our entire Capitol Caucus, with the exception of Senator Hertel, will turn over next year. So it'll be a very, very important election year statewide for us. At the local scene here, we're a month removed from some very critical elections in the city of Lansing and East Lansing. We did some polling leading up to the elections, and we had 44% of residents in Lansing and East Lansing felt that the cities were moving in the right direction, while 30% said the wrong direction. And so again, I'll let you decide if those are solid numbers or not, but we certainly would want to see that probably getting above the 50% threshold. I will tell you that in both Lansing and East Lansing, roads and infrastructure, jobs and economy were the top two issues. So if you looked at the residents in both of those cities, they were in agreement upon that. The third one down, the city budgets and the legacy costs, that was East Lansing. That really kind of resonated very, very well with East Lansing residents, probably because they were in the middle of a city income tax debate and discussion. And while public safety really kind of resonated there in that third spot with the city of Lansing. So a year ago, we talked about an upcoming mayoral election in 2017, and that there was speculation that State Representative Andy Shore, City Council President Judy Brown Clark would file to run for City Council. Remember, at that time, Mayor Bonero was still in the race. We didn't know what would happen, with that. So shortly after the first of the year, when Mayor Bonero had decided he was not going to run, Andy and Judy not only filed, but became the candidates and the clear-cut favorites as we got into that. And Andy won that going away. I think many of you probably in this room know Andy. We're very excited. We think that it's going to. You probably couldn't find more opposite ends, right? And the great leadership and strong leadership of Mayor Bonero and Andy, and then when it kind of is personalities and how they approach sort of the relationship aspects of things. And so we think we have an opportunity to continue to build on the economic momentum and growth that we've seen under the Bonero administration, but also too, I think with Andy kind of maybe expanding and seeing a little bit more regional partnerships and regional collaboration there. We get into East Lansing. Again, last year we talked about a proposed city income tax. We didn't know whether or not it would be on the ballot, but City of East Lansing moved forward. They did put it on the ballot, and it would have raised approximately $10 million. Then the city decided they would roll back property taxes of $5 million. They raised the threshold of from $600 up to $5,000. And so when it was all said and done, I think everyone was very confused. There was an effort run by a group called Citizens for East Lansing's Future, very well-run campaign. It was a no campaign. And I think the voters' day of, it was a 53-46 decision to oppose the income tax. At the same time, the voters, though, the second part of that question was to roll back property taxes, and that overwhelmingly passed, although it will not go into effect because the income tax piece didn't pass. So I guess what I'm saying, it was a very confusing proposition. You've seen other folks that have kind of went out for legacy costs, and they put millages on the ballots, and they said specifically it's to address legacy costs, and here's where it is. But this was very, very confusing, and 85% of our members in the city of East Lansing had indicated that they did not support this. They really didn't understand it, and so we kind of say, what's next? And so the business community is still engaged. Our anticipation, hope would be to deliver the first part of the coming year, a letter with some recommendations to the city council and city leadership, and kind of going back to the FHT with the 40 plus recommendations that are there. We realize that we have to be part of the solution as well. It's easy to stand up, I think, and be in opposition of something that you believe strong in, but at the same time, what are we doing to provide some solutions for the city leadership as well? So we'll continue following the transition for the shore administration, as well as what's happening in East Lansing. We can go to the next slide. When we look at regional prosperity, I will tell you that we firmly believe at the Chamber, I firmly believe that these are three leading indicators that will determine our future economic prosperity. It's the talent. You heard it in the Michigan Business Index this morning. Without question, the number one issue that's out there for businesses, not only in our region, across the state, across the country. We're all fighting for, and how do we advocate for, and keeping and retaining and attracting talent. The infrastructure investment, again, very, very critical, and you make the argument there that with infrastructure investment comes economic growth and economic development, and also the talent development. When we look at our region, and we look at infrastructure investment, over the next 5 years, we have $400 million plus of projects that lack funding in our region. $400 million plus that lack funding in our region for infrastructure investment. You go to the west side of the state, they have well over $400 million of projects that are fully funded. So it's this inequity that's out there. We have to continue to have a strong voice at the state and federal level, and that's going to require all hands on deck with the business community as well. And then the municipal finance, and I mentioned that earlier with the OPEB legislation that passed last week, but just here in our region alone, there's about $1 billion of the unfunded legacies and liabilities, and 20 cents on the dollar are going to support those other post-employment benefits. That's 20 cents on the dollar that's not getting allocated and spent on infrastructure, roads, public safety, some of those core services of local and regional governmental units as well. So we'll leave it. We're a month removed from celebration of regional growth, where we recognized five businesses for their investment. I think it was $117 million and close to, I think, 900 jobs, or close to 1,000 jobs from these 5 investments that we recognized. Over the last 12 years, we've recognized 65 businesses, invested about $2.5 billion, and created close to 4,000 new jobs, throughout our region. So you look at the last decade here, there's been a significant, tremendous amount of growth. It was an unbelievable announcement a week ago here on a $450 million new healthcare system, and I think we could potentially go into 2018, and I'll leave this to my good friend Bob Trezise, but probably go into 2018 with $1 billion plus in economic development projects on here in our region. And so when you look at that for a region our size, that is beyond significant. I think that's important and significant for a lot of regions across the country, but when you look at an MSA our size, it's very, very significant. So I think all in all, we're very optimistic on where our region is today. We continue to see a great deal of job creation, job growth, and economic investment. And I'm going to leave you with a quick video clip from our Celebration of Regional Growth program last month. Thank you.
From medical care to mixed use, turbofans to trucks, and even fancy flavors. In the last year, these 5 companies have invested $117 million, created more than 800 jobs, and made the Lansing region a better place to run a business and raise a family. Greater Lansing is continuing to grow thanks to the hard work and investment of the Chamber's 1,100 members.
I like the small town feel. I'm a small town girl myself. Grew up just outside of Lansing.
Very proud to play a part in the rebirth of my old neighborhood.
There's a lot of pride in the Michigan campus. There's a lot of pride in the individuals that are making this product.
I gotta tip my hat to the workforce in this area.
Every employee here is committed to Eaton Rapids' success.
The more they invest, the easier my job is, so it's a good thing.
I think it's just been a very good location for us.
It's very important to us that we stay as Lansing-based as possible.
It takes a lot than just popping a building down. It takes lots of money and time and investment. And being done right, in the right way, takes even more.
Tim, thank you for the report and the great job you do there at the Chamber. We really appreciate that. So economic development, of course, leads to growth, and the guy in charge of that for our area is the head of the Lansing Economic Area Partnership. So let me bring up Bob Trezise.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks. Thanks for all you do, Chris. And I see so many of our LEAP members were sometimes confused being a government agency, and we're a private company. We represent Ingham, Eaton, and Clinton County, and so many of you are members and make LEAP possible. And I want to make sure to say thank you to all of you today. It's cold outside, but the global Lansing economy is hot, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So as far as our, I'm going to have to, I apologize, but can I do this?
No.
Sorry. Okay, our new economy division in blow this through this very, very fast. In 2017, we have a huge entrepreneurial department at LEAP, and we were working to create an ecosystem of entrepreneurialism, which is so important. We do so many buildings, but it's critical to fill in those buildings with people and ideas and creativity. And so we have had a big year with our new economy division. We do over 35 events, 2,600 attendees, but we're, of course, very well known for our business development. And we had a very big year. We had an okay year in 2016. Our 2017 year was $650 million of private investment. That's not a total of the economy. That's just projects that LEAP has touched in a very value-added way. In other words, maybe they wouldn't have happened without LEAP's assistance. Maybe they wouldn't have happened at the scale and scope that they have without LEAP's assistance. So those guys, $650 million of private investment. And the fun part is the range of businesses in our region, ranging from huge biotechnology companies like Neogen. We're going to announce 2 companies here in a couple weeks. Pretend you didn't hear that today. Tecomet and XG Sciences, which are amazing nanotechnology and medical device manufacturers. And by the way, our medical device manufacturing and aerospace industry is a secret that we can't hold close to our chest anymore. Those are really big, growing businesses, industries in our area. The Center City project, we packaged that and put it together with our partners in East Lansing. And congratulations to Steve Willoughby over here. There's Keith Lambert, Victoria Meadows, and Jerry Norris, too, from our staff this morning. So thank you for being here. But the Center City is 2 very tall buildings. We're for that. We think that tall buildings should be in downtown Lansing, Michigan Avenue, and Lansing. That corridor is in the connection between a Big Ten university, capital city, downtown's East Lansing and Lansing are what makes us on the path to Madison or Columbus or Ann Arbor and Grand Rapids. Out of all those, and this is just a few of the projects, I just listed a few. Oh, McLaren Greater Lansing, yeah. So an entire new hospital was announced, and we, this is a big congratulations to McLaren and Michigan State University who put that project together, but LEAP played an important role. Every Friday the last 8 months, we met in our office and put together different needs for the project, as well as how we're going to redevelop the sites that will be left behind in South Lansing, and I'm confident that we're going to do great things on those sites as well. So 600 private jobs total, that doesn't count construction or multiplier effect, and then nearly 3,000 jobs have been retained. The next slide, please. So overall, actually, why don't we just pass this because of time? And that one too, we'll go on. Yep. Okay, so the thing you want to know about, are we moving the big needle? So LEAP had a big year. We had the privilege and honor to work with many, many of you, businesses and entrepreneurs in our community, and we made had a big year basically. But are we moving the big needle? And so just a couple things I want to bring to your attention, because as you know, you're all going to walk out of here as newly crowned ambassadors today, right? For Global Lansing, meaning Ingham, Eaton, and Clinton County. So in 2016, that's the latest data that we have, our gross domestic product as a region soared to 4%. And that, by the way, in that year is double the national average, and in fact was much higher than Grand Rapids or Kalamazoo. I say that in a friendly way because I really, really admire those cities. And if the state has any great future in the global economy, it's going to be that we have a bunch of really great cities working together and functioning correctly. The Lansing, East Lansing, the 3-county area basically, finished 18th out of 200 in 2017 nationally as the best place for small business. We are ranked #1 in the entire country for basically cell phone mobility. Our region finished 4th in the Midwest for best places for college graduates to work. And I know what you're thinking right now. Yeah, there's all these lists all the time. But actually, this was quite a scientific study and really looked at per capita income and affordable housing and a lot of different actual statistics. And we finished very, very well. This is an absolutely critical statistic. I'll mention too, for 4 years in a row, we've had population growth. You know, in 2010, we were only one of 2 regions in the entire state of Michigan that had population growth. McLaren, I already said, and you know, in the same year, this is remarkable to me, in the same year that $450 million brand new hospital, very rare announcement to happen anywhere in the United States, happens here. At the same time, you know, Sparrow opened its Herbert Herman Cancer Center, which is could be in any big city in America on Michigan Avenue. So that all happens one year. The next slide, please. The Food Product Center, Innovation Center at MSU, which LEAP got going with $1 million grant from the MEDC, is going to be a magnet for the entire Midwest in agricultural sort of stage 2 development of companies. 7 MSU grad programs are #1 in the country. LCC was ranked the #1 community college in the state of Michigan. And you can see the rest of it. Just the bottom one, if I could pay attention to that for a minute. So Costco opens. We met and worked with Costco for 2 years, although we didn't have anything to do with their final location. But what a fascinating interaction with those guys. They are relentless how they measure our region. You can't lie to these big retailers. They make these big bets on regions that have a big median and disposable income future. And this is a good sign for us. You can't fool or trick these guys. You can't wave pom-poms. Costco opens, joining Apple Store and Whole Foods. And this is a true sign of people betting on our region. And then quickly we'll finish off. And what we think about, these aren't predictions, Charlie, that's for you. But let me just say these are some things that we watch closely, and some good and some we worry about. So manufacturing is really strong, but we also really, I think Marshall Cardona is here today from Capital Area Manufacturing Council, who does an absolutely awesome job at Capital Area Michigan Works. But yesterday, one of their staff was in our office, and a big high-tech and well-paying manufacturer had a job fair last week. They're going to be filling about 160 jobs. 4 people showed up. This is to worry about the impact on the growth of the economy. In other words, is it just flat out capped at this point, how far we can go in the labor market? We really worry about that. We think that, well, the new McLaren Hospital has already been announced, but in Center City, Red Cedar, yes, I know, dreaded, yes, it's going to be announced. I'm sure it is going to be announced, I promise, on Michigan Avenue. We need to watch the volatility of car sales because of the impact on our direct region. In other words, the Grand River plant, it's all cars. So we need to watch that very carefully, and they're not working right now, actually. So malls and the key retail corridors, I noticed that Regal Movie Theater, their trading was taken down a week ago. You know, it's a big movie theater in Lansing Mall. We need to really watch these malls. I mean, the future, we could talk about the rest of the morning, very complex in what we're watching, but we're worried about that on the corridors too. The insurance industry, very strong, and is looking good. We're the hub of Michigan for insurance industries. There's huge growth there, and I want to pay even more attention. We're going to be creating some really cool InsurTech programs for insurance. Agricultural business, Keith Lambert is attracting business from around the country and world to our region. You're going to see a number of actual attraction announcements this year. And interestingly, you know, we had a big German manufacturer here last week and some other a big Italian firm that we contacted a month ago that we didn't know about, and we're going down tomorrow in Detroit and visiting them. They're looking for a place in Michigan to be at, so our trip to Italy was very productive. But it's ag businesses, actually, and I mean really high-tech, interesting ag businesses. We're going to surprise you with some very big ag announcements in the region. And new developments along Michigan Avenue. We'll finish here. The next slide, please. Yeah, things to worry about. You know, I know there's a lot of talk, and it's true, of course, about legacy costs and all of that stuff. But what I don't hear talked about at all, in my maybe not so humble opinion, is I just think there's a coming revenue calamity. I really do. And I just got to tell you, in the 90s, yep, I'm that old, I guess, or whatever, but We're at the peak of when government and schools and infrastructure, revenue should be flooding into government right now. And this is good, because the best way we're going to keep and attract talent, and then thus keep and attract business, is that we look good, that things are good. It doesn't matter just physically, but psychologically, it really matters. And I don't get it right now. The revenue should be we're at the peak. If there's ever revenue that was going to be available for $400 million of infrastructure or anything else, it would be right now. In other words, these are the good times. I mean, the really good times. So when things downturn, I'm really concerned what that means. And if you think we have revenue trouble now, and we do, government should have more money than ever, but they're all cutting right now. This does not make sense. It's not, there's something structurally completely wrong. We are shaping, I can't give it away, and the staff is nervous now, but we're going to be creating a big new branding and marketing campaign, because we've noticed with big site consultants that we've been meeting with and others, that they're suddenly saying the following: the global climate change matters to us, to our businesses. And they're beginning to worry a little bit about making 50-year decisions about their new corporate headquarters or manufacturing plants right along the coast, in the coastal areas. This is what they're beginning to say, just beginning to say. And so this is, sadly, I don't relish this at all, but I mean, this is a strength of Michigan. We're completely predictable. We are totally safe. I say this again with huge sympathy for the coasts out there, and where awful things are happening. But frankly, we don't have earthquakes, hurricanes, fires, tornadoes, all of that. It's cold outside, but we can drive through that. It's not that big a deal. But you're looking for a safe, predictable environment for the next 50 years with water? It might be Michigan. This is going to be a big part of our marketing campaign, is seizing upon that strength that we have. And I'll end it right there. I really appreciate everybody. Thank you very much.
As always, a lot of enthusiasm. I've always loved that about you, Bob, even though you continually run over time. A couple things I very quickly want to, because we are going to run over here about 15 minutes. I apologize for that. I know we all have things to do. I wanted to have Sue Biela stand up. She's the head of the Michigan Festivals and Events Association. Sue, where are you at? Yeah, way in the back. And I have her stand up only because she is an incredible economic source that usually doesn't wind up in a lot of indexes because of the festivals that are going on around the state, and everything from the Posen Potato Festival to the Cherry Festival, the International Cherry Festival. So these are big things, and they've had a very good year, as a matter of fact. And of course, the Broad Business College, the International Division, who's up here in front. Thomas Holt was going to talk a little bit about that. It's been a passion of mine, as you know, to get all of us to export more, because there's nothing like sending your product, your service overseas and getting cash back. That makes us really in a much better state. And Thomas was going to do a presentation today, but he got hung up because of the weather in Amsterdam. Oh, right. It's sunny and 70 in Amsterdam. That's good. All right, with that, let's. I'll talk to him when he gets back. Let me bring up our singing economist, very good friend, and one of my favorite people, quite frankly, Dr. Charles Ballard from the MSU Department of Economics.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Chris. It's always a pleasure to take part in this annual event. Thank you for putting it together, and an honor to be on the podium with you, Bob, and Tim, and Jack. I mean, this is a great thing, and I am, especially since Bob established the precedent, I'm going to get down here. We've had some pretty good years. I can remember the first time that I came to one of these events, our economy was pretty iffy. And after a really bad first decade of the 21st century, We finally got some growth starting in 2009, 2010, and it was a little iffy at first, but then it gained some momentum. 2015 was the best year of this century. Actually, I should say 2015 was the best year of this millennium, with broad-based growth, reduction in the poverty rate. Next slide shows that 2016 wasn't as good as 2015, but it was still pretty good. Real median household income continued to grow. And then the next slide, 2017, well, we haven't closed the books on 2017. Not until next September will we really have all of the data that we would like to have on 2017. But the way that it looks to me is that 2017, based on what I see so far, is likely to be better than 2016 and maybe even as good as 2015, which is pretty darn good. And per capita personal income is higher than it's ever been, both in Michigan and in the rest of the country. I remember this started to be true a couple of years ago, and I would say, our economy is bigger than it's ever been, and a lot of people say, really? Because we had been used to so much bad news over such a long period of time that it was a surprise. But the next slide will show you, and this is a slide that I like to show every year just because it goes back to 1929 and it gives you an idea of how much more affluent than we were. I mean, my father was born in a place that did not have indoor plumbing or electricity. That's not that many generations back, and we have made tremendous economic progress. And then you can see I chose here the black dots for the United States and the green dots, which seems like the only reasonable color for Michigan. And you can see we had sustained growth for decade after decade, and then we had a really tough decade. But then we've bounced back. We've actually made some progress. We fell to 37th among the 50 states in income. We are now 32nd. Might make some further progress when we get data for the next year. So our economy is bigger, average income is bigger, and yet the median household in Michigan is still well below where they were in 1999. And what that tells you is that our growth in recent years has not been very well balanced. People like me, people like a lot of the people in this room have done pretty well. The top half has done pretty well. The top 10% has done very well, but maybe not so. That the question is, can we get that to go down to the entire population? I want to show you three sort of related slides. The trajectory of employment in the U.S., and in this amazing economic expansion, it's sort of the little expansion that could. It keeps going. We've added 17.5 million jobs nationally, and we're way above pre-recession levels. So the next slide shows you that's the shape for the last 28 years of employment in the U.S. So growth in the 90s, a stall, then a big drop in the Great Recession, and then recovery. Now, then go on to the next slide. Let's think about Michigan. Sort of the same pattern, except the downturn was a lot worse. And we are, even though we've added almost 600,000 jobs since we bottomed out, that's pretty good. But the first decade of the 21st century was so rough on the Michigan economy that we still are 280,000 jobs below where we were at our all-time peak in March of 2000. So next slide shows you the trajectory for Michigan. And if you remember what we had a couple of slides ago, it was kind of smoother. Now let's go to the next one, which is about Lansing area. Not as volatile as the state of Michigan as a whole. It's southeast lower Michigan that really struggled a lot more than we did, even though I'm not saying that the Great Recession was fun for us, but there were other places in Michigan that were even worse. Here's what the Lansing area looks like. So we had, like all of these other places, strong growth in the 90s, and then kind of a dip and early in this century, and then a big dip, and now we've come back. Actually, these are just the official Bureau of Labor Statistics data. What they show is essentially no growth. Don't worry that that's down. That's essentially flat in the last year. Where will it go in the next few years? Well, there just aren't many people now who aren't working. 5 years ago, you could find people, they weren't working. You could hire them. Now, who can you find? Who's not working? Well, my parents are not working. They're 90 years old. I'm glad they're not working. My grandchildren are not working. They're 7 and 4 and 1. I'm glad they're not working. But other than kids and old folks, who have we got who's not working? Stay-at-home moms and stay-at-home dads who have made that choice for their family. Some of them might be lured into the labor market with additional wage growth. And then who else is not working? People with substance abuse problems. There just isn't a lot. There isn't a lot of slack in the labor market. We'll see whether we can grow, but at least for the moment, the economy seems to have momentum. Most of the forecasters are saying nationally job growth will be more than 150,000 a month. This last jobs report that we had a few days ago exceeded expectations. But again, it gets harder to grow jobs when you're pretty darn close to full employment. And if the economy continues to grow for another year and a half or so, it will be the longest expansion in American economic history, which is really remarkable. So lots of good news. I'm optimistic about the next 6 months. I'm optimistic about the next year. It's when I look, as I told about my grandchildren, it's when I look to what kind of world are we going to leave to them? Are we going to leave them a world of crumbling third world infrastructure? Are we going to leave them huge debts because we ran our credit cards? And so I don't want to put too much rain on the parade, but I'll be echoing some of the concerns that Bob expressed. Here we are nationally, we're at full employment or very close to it, and we're running deficits of $500 billion a year. That doesn't make a whole lot of economic sense. And so, I'm not saying that our tax system is perfect. Far from it. There are things that I would do to reform our taxes. But a great big tax cut at this time is something that it's really hard to find an economist who, you can find some, but not any who I would call mainstream. Because basic macroeconomics, when do you do a fiscal stimulus? You do it in 2009, and we did it, and it helped to reduce the severity of the Great Recession. The Great Recession would have been worse without those tax cuts and the ARRA. Well, now we've got, if we did nothing, the official calculations say that we're going to add another $5 trillion to our national debt over the next decade or so. And then the tax cut will increase that by another $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. And, $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, and pretty soon you're talking about real money. And so the next slide, this is federal debt as a percent of gross domestic product. And here you see it growing in the 80s, and then remember we actually balanced our budget from 1997 to 2000. I'm okay with that. I think balancing budgets is sort of a good idea, but then anytime you've got a deep recession like we had, that's going to skyrocket the debt, and there's almost no way to avoid that. If you had tried to balance the budget in 2009. It would have been catastrophic. And then the debt as a percentage of GDP has sort of leveled out, or at least that's what the projections say. But next slide. That previous slide, because we don't know when the next recession will come, the the Office of Management and Budget, when they put together those projections, they just assume there will never be another recession. Sort of like if the U.S. Geological Survey said, we can't predict when earthquakes will happen, so let's just assume that there will never be an earthquake, right? Anyhow, maybe we can have the longest economic expansion in economic history, but do you really think that we'll never have another recession? I think that's kind of unlikely. And if we do, those debt numbers will skyrocket. And then the other thing, next slide. So here we are at or near full employment, and the fiscal authorities are stomping their foot on the accelerator. What are the monetary authorities going to do? Well, I'm not sure. But I think there's a decent chance that the monetary authorities will tap their foot on the brake. In other words, the Fed may respond by increasing interest rates more rapidly than previously assumed. We'll see. I'm not, it's hard to know for sure. And I will say that Jerome Powell looks to me to be a very solid guy as the new Fed chair. But current situation, we're spending net interest payments on the federal debt of $430 billion a year. And it's only that low because the federal government is borrowing at very low rates by historical standards. Everybody in this room can remember times when 2.4% looked like looked impossibly good, right? Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I bought a house, it was a 12% mortgage, and I was lucky to get that good. So if interest rates were to rise, debt service would soar. And if we ever have a recession, debt service will soar. And so that's why I'm really concerned. Next slide. Oh, yes, but those who are voting for this fiscal stimulus say that it will not raise the deficit because we'll have so much extra growth. Yeah. So one of my metaphors for if you believe that, you're like Charlie Brown, right? Lucy kept saying, "I'm not going to pull the football out," but every time she did. My other metaphor is it's like those movies that some of you have probably seen, where I find myself screaming at the screen saying, "No, don't go down in that basement. You know what's going to happen when you go down in that basement." Anyhow, and the other thing is that this tax cut is very heavily tilted toward those at the very top. Here's, I want to end quickly. Here's the great equalization of the 40s and 50s, where this is the share of percentage of income received by the top 1% of households. And their share went down. By the way, they were able to make it through the winter. But what that means is that the bottom 99% did better in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Since then, it's gone in the opposite direction. And so what that says is that it's even more, we're pushing toward even greater concentration of income and wealth, which is something that is of concern, at least to me. Oh, and Vice President Burnham has come back into the room, so I want to make clear to everybody that I am speaking here only for myself. I have not vetted this with any of the higher authorities at Michigan State University. So if you want to throw rotten eggs and tomatoes, throw them at me, not at MSU. Okay. All right. So next slide. Next slide. On those weary notes, let's sing. Okay. You knew you weren't going to get out of this without this. I've made it my mission to get Michigan singing again, and so here is the first verse of the best known of Michigan's many state songs on the next slide. And, did you cut off my song? You have to sing it on your own. I have to sing it on my, okay. If you know the words, you can sing along with me, or if you know the tune of "Oh Christmas Tree," you can hum along with me. A song to thee, fair state of mine, Michigan, my Michigan. But greater song than this is thine, Michigan, my Michigan. The whisper of the forest tree, the thunder of the inland sea, unite in one grand symphony of Michigan, my Michigan. Thank you very much.
You're still awesome. You're still awesome. Charlie, thank you. Makes you wonder why the last slide didn't crop up. Nice work back there, too, by the way. Okay, I want to very quickly thank the sponsors. I did want to do this because Al was the first to allude to it, but everybody else spoke to it. Our number one challenge for businesses in the state of Michigan is talent, getting it, retaining it. So your staffs are valuable. Think about that. Everybody's projecting they're going to spend more money on training and things like that. That's money well spent. And the third issue, challenging, was growth. And what they're telling us is it's not I can't handle my growth, it's that I can't grow without people. So we all face this same situation. I want to thank our sponsors. You can see them in your program. Accident Fund, obviously from the beginning, thank you. Dean Transportation, Shaheen Chevrolet, and answering your question on cars. They are selling cars like crazy and good cars. C2AE, PNC Bank, who has money to lend, as does LAFQ. MSU Broad College of Business, we appreciate that. Eagle Eye, great facility out here and the great job they always do. Channel 10, obviously, and Capital Area Regional Airport. Dave Trumpy took pictures today. He's taking them right now. I hope you didn't scratch in appropriately because they'll wind up on the internet. You can go to the MichiganBusinessNetwork.com. All those pictures will be there, as well as the actual video of this entire proceeding. So you can go to that website and call it up as well. I want to thank my folks, Jeff Mosier, Mike Steibel, Jeff McCowan, Wade Tong, and Carissa Geiger. If you guys would raise your hands real quick, take a round of applause from me. Appreciate it. Also would like to acknowledge, especially at this time of the year, our partners and content contributors and say thank you to all of them. Now, we have two things we give out when we circulate the MFBI. We say you will be eligible for a drawing for one of two prizes. And the first one, Nicole Knoll, if you would stand up, is from the Capital Region International Airport. And it is a travel gift certificate.
It is. This mic's not on.
Nope, here you go.
You can hear me anyways, I think.
Now.
Good morning, everyone. So one of the prizes is a $250 voucher, good for travel on any carrier out of the Lansing Airport. And Amy Ritzema from Grand Rapids was the recipient of it. So think of the gift of travel for the holidays. Contact your local travel agency or the concierge to learn more information.
Excellent. All right. And Tara Draper, where are you at? Tara, are you still here? Come on up real quickly, because you got to use my mic. Tara Draper's with Treetops, and they give out the other. And this is a drawing of everybody in the state that's filled out the survey.
Good morning. I'm from Treetops Resort. We just finished a $4.5 million renovation of all of our hotel rooms, and our ski hills are going really well today. So we have an overnight stay at Treetops Resort, and the winner goes to Carol Lowe of Corbin Design, Traverse City.
There you go, and thank you. Remember, you can get all this stuff on the MichiganBusinessNetwork.com website. Pull it up there. Want to thank you all for being here. Let's have a big round of applause for our panel of experts up here. Now go out there and have a great holiday season and a very prosperous year. Thanks for being here.